Can you tell us where you study, what your major is, and your current year?
Okay, so I went to Brown. I ended up majoring in computer science, and I actually graduated this year. So I now work, but yeah, I was class of 2020.
So what is one thing that you think that contributed the most towards your acceptance? And what do you think your biggest challenge was?
In high school, I had very good test scores. I managed to come top in the country for some things, for some exams that I had taken. I think that that's definitely something that set me apart possibly from other applicants. I will say that like having normally high test scores is like a pretty standard thing when people apply to Ivy Leagues. And so you have to have really, really high test scores for things to actually be noticed. So I played basketball a lot. I directed some plays, did a lot of music. And I think that through all those things, I was able to show that, I don't think that colleges are necessarily looking for like, you need to be really good at something, but I think they are looking for people that are interested in many things and have the ability to go deep into something once they find that they are passionate about that. My biggest challenge was really writing the essays. Like I mentioned before, I think so many people that apply to these kinds of schools have such cookie cutter experiences, right? Like everybody has extracurriculars, everybody has high test scores. And at the end of the day, the only way that you can really make yourself stand out from this pool of applicants, sort of apart from being truly, truly exceptional in something, is like with an essay that makes you sound like a real person, right? Because otherwise you're kind of just like a bunch of numbers and a bunch of activities. You have to simultaneously juggle trying to show off about yourself, which is kind of the point, and sounding like you aren't so full of yourself that nobody ever wants to come a mile near you or do any work with you, right? And so trying to balance those two competing interests is difficult. I also think that writing an essay that doesn't sound forced and sounds like you actually meant it is hard, because when you see the Common App prompts, like tell us about a time in your life where like you became an adult. I think that was like the prompt that I actually wrote. And there's no one point in your life, obviously, where you just stop becoming a child and become an adult. And I think that since the scope of the essay is so short, having to drill down on like one specific moment and be like, this is where everything happened, makes it sound really corny and really cheesy, right? Like picking the right essay to write is the most difficult thing. Once you actually figure out that you have the right topic and it's actually an experience that is meaningful to you, then you'll be able to write it without it sounding terrible. But if you try and force something, then it didn't come out. And I think my first like 2 or 3 iterations of my Common App essay, like the main one that I had written, were really bad because they were just forced and they weren't really something that I really felt.
You said essays are your biggest challenge. So
Yeah.
like, can you give us an example of an essay that you wrote that you found was difficult but also paid off?
I'll tell you kind of my progression, right? I was like, oh, I want to sound like intellectual. So in high school, I really liked doing math and I really liked doing music. And I wrote a Common App essay about how I thought the two were similar. The problem was that wasn't something that I necessarily cared about deeply. Like I did actually believe that they were similar, but I don't really do things in my life that are all about bringing like music and math together that much, right? And I sent that essay off actually to my early colleges that I had applied to, and I got rejected from all of them. And then I was like, okay, well, I need to redo something. And so then I sat and I thought about it, and I spent like a couple of weeks at an orphanage where I basically just like lived with some kids and I walked around, and it had like a really profound impact on me, but for very simple reasons. Like I think that their value system was just so different than the one that I had grown up with, and I think that was something that actually had a big impact on me. But it didn't say anything intellectual about me. Like it was a simple essay that didn't make any crazy points, but it was about a moment that was impactful to me, and at the end it came across as very genuine. But like you can tell when someone is trying to project a version of themselves that isn't true to who they really are. And when you can tell that, it makes you look even poorer upon the applicant. And so this like simple essay that I wrote just about like how people are different was one that worked much better for me in the end than something like more quote unquote intellectual. There are a lot of people that think about writing essays in like, oh, I'm going to write this essay to further this objective. Like I'm going to show this college X thing about me in this essay. And while I think that there is like some merit to that strategy in that you have so many essays, right? There are your main essays and then all your supplemental essays. But really like in your main essay, I would just focus on being yourself and don't try and prove any like special thing.
What was your approach to the application process? Like, did you start in the summer, use a planner, schedule your own deadlines and stuff like that?
I would say that I started kind of midway through my junior year fall. And so I started, I don't know when people start these days. I obviously did this like 4.5 years ago. But I first started out with a big Excel spreadsheet where I basically listed a bunch of colleges that I thought I might be interested in, and then I collected various numbers that I thought I might care about, right? And so then in the Excel spreadsheet, I had a bunch of columns. One was like size of school, then another one was like ranking overall in undergraduate, and another one was like ranking in some specific departments that I happened to be interested in. So I looked at like rankings in the computer science department, for instance. You can sort by a bunch of different lists, and you can see, depending on what you care about, what might be like the right set of things to apply to. And then after I'd figured that out, which I think took like a good amount of time, I also remember using like the website Niche. It was like niche.com or something that has a bunch of ratings and reviews about colleges that are submitted from students that currently go there. And then I started writing some essays. Like I told you all before, my first version of my Common App was the one that went out to all my early applications, and that one was terrible. And so then as I realized that things were not going well, I kind of course corrected and redid a lot of like my portfolio, what I was sending out. In order to avoid something like that, I would definitely recommend thinking about your Common App essay, like the big essays, early on, even before you kind of decide necessarily which schools you might want to apply to, because again, like I said before, just figuring out what to even write for those essays is by far the biggest issue. And if you just have that thought process running in your head, then you won't be scrambling last minute. Let me just like pick the first topic that comes to mind and write it, because that topic is not going to be a good one. So that's definitely something I wish I did differently. And then I really wrote the majority of my applications over winter break because it was hard to do at the same time as school. And then I submitted them. I mean, most deadlines are early to mid-January, I believe. And so yeah, all of December was really just like I was off from school and I was writing college applications.
Was stress any of an issue when you were working on college apps?
Yeah, for sure. I was pretty stressed out. I think I was frustrated because my parents they had a lot of thoughts on what should go into my essays and what shouldn't go into my essays. I wanted really my essays to be true to myself, and so then we argued a lot over that, and then I was never really convinced I had the right topic until I really finished it. I think that just not knowing what I would have written about or what would be the best thing for me to write about was really stressful.
So what kept you going through like the application process, and like what kept you motivated through like your final year of college, especially during quarantine?
A good question. I think that what kept me motivated truly during the application process was that I was really very excited to go to college. All of the places I was applying to, I would like think about all the fun that I would have there, and I thought that it was kind of a cool experience, right? To go on the website and see all the things that they have for you to do and get excited about all of them in turn. I think that like without actually being excited to attend college or attend any of the colleges that I was applying to, I think I would have had a miserable time. There's pressure that comes from the outside, but there's also pressure that you put on yourself. And so I was like, I I want to stay motivated throughout this thing because I've like convinced myself that this is something I want to do a good job on because it'll be worth it in the future. And so even though it was a very, very long process, like I had multiple fights with my mom. I like sat in a room all by myself, just writing essays for a long time. I like definitely cried. You're convinced that this is the right thing for you to be doing for your future. And two, you're like very excited about the experiences you'll have, where my biggest motivator is through the application process. The thing that keeps me motivated during quarantine, and now I work, right? And so this is more, I think, applicable to my job, is that, again, I find it interesting. And because I find it interesting, I want to dedicate time to being better at it. And I think if I like sit and do nothing, then I get really, really bored. And so having something to wrap my head around and think about and work on and see continuously improve is basically like how I fill my time and how I end up feeling happy.
You said that when you were applying to college, you were motivated by thinking of the time you'd have at college and all the cool things you get to experience. How did that actually line up, your expectations line up with what happened when you did go to college? Did those things come true? Did you feel the same way as you thought you would?
Obviously, when you're applying, you have a very romanticized view of what it's going to be like. Because when you're applying, you never think about all the work you're going to have to do, right? Like at the end of the day, college is a really, really busy time. College definitely at its high points lined up exactly with what I was imagining in high school. But it came with a lot of low points also that were really difficult that obviously I didn't think about when I was applying, right? And so the way I think of college is that it's high variance. You have a really good time and you have a really bad time, but at the end, like, it's usually worth it. I know some people that have a tough time in college, right? So I'm not going to say that it's necessarily always worth it. For me, I think the good outweighed the bad. And I'm definitely happy I went.
What general advice do you have for students aiming for Ivy Leagues?
My advice really would be, don't think about Ivy Leagues as Ivy Leagues at all. Like, I think that when people think about the Ivy League, they're like, oh, I have to go to these schools, otherwise it will mean this thing about me, or these schools are so much better than other schools. And that places undue pressure on yourself. You'll end up feeling bad about it. And at the end of the day, really, the experience you have there is almost exactly the same as the experience that you would have in any other school, right? Like, the stuff we did in class is the same stuff that most other students do in colleges that are pretty well ranked around the country, right? There's no like special distinguishing factor. There's no like magic dust that makes us special. I think your goal really should just be get into the right college for yourself, and trying to aim too high also is not even necessarily a good thing, because I know many people who went to my school, like my close friends who came out of college with like an ego that was totally battered, right? Because going to a school where everybody is pretty high achieving is hard. Everybody's really good at something, and it's really easy to feel like you have nothing going for you or that you have no special skills. I could tell that like perhaps Brown wasn't the right place for those people, right? Because they came out of it feeling worse about themselves than when they went in. But if you can identify what the right environment will be for you to learn and grow, right? Like, basically be true to yourself, right? You know what you want, you know what you like. Don't get caught up in this web of like, oh, rankings, like this college is the best at this. In reality, in undergrad, it doesn't even really matter, right? Like, and most employers don't even really care which college you went to, as long as they know it in some form, right? And most employers know like the top, I would say, even 100 colleges. Like maybe the top 5 are considered special. If you really, really want to go to an Ivy League, you definitely have to work hard. Like, they're not easy to get into, partially because of this like perception that they do have magic dust. You have to make sure that you have good scores. You have to write really genuine essays. And at the end of the day, the thing is you just have to be lucky, right? Like nobody really knows what happens in college admissions processes. It's kind of as much of voodoo magic to me still as it is to both of you, right? There's no secret formula that if you do X, Y, and Z things, you will get into this college. And the less you subscribe to that notion, the happier you'll end up being, because when you inevitably get rejected from places, because it happens to everyone, I got rejected from so many places, right? It doesn't reflect on yourself, right? Like you just got unlucky. There are so many people that are trying to go for limited spaces, and all of them are probably qualified and all of them probably deserve to be there. And there's no good way to really pick between them. So you kind of just randomly go and pick somebody.
Out of curiosity, do you think anything about your experience at an Ivy League, or maybe your school in particular, is gonna help you in whatever future plans you have that maybe that experience you wouldn't have gotten at a different school?
The biggest thing you get out of going to a really good school, I think, is the friends you make. Because this is another thing that I definitely thought of in high school. I was kind of just like, everything in the world is a meritocracy, right? It doesn't really work like that. When I applied to jobs, if you know somebody, it's so much easier, right? The world basically runs on shared connections. And if whatever career you go into, if you know many people that are successful in the field, right, and they happen to be, say, your friends from college, that opens up so many doors for you. And if anything will be really useful to me career-wise, it will be that. It'll be that my friends that I made in college all will probably go on to do pretty good things, because I think they're all very talented people. So that is career-wise, future-facing. What did it give me? I think it's really my network of friends. In my general experience, I think that Brown, I really loved Brown, and I think that at the end of the day, the most important thing you can get out of college is a better understanding of who you are. And while that sounds cheesy, it's all of the stuff you learn in your classes, forget at the end of college, right? You're gonna forget them the next semester when you take a new set of classes. You don't actually retain any information or anything. So the actual content that you're learning is not relevant. I think the things that are really important, or that ended up being really important in college for me, were all the social interactions and the people I met and the hard situations that I was in, and being alone for the first time kind of, and learning how to deal with that. And I think that I grew a lot emotionally as a person, almost I think more than I did intellectually. But at the end of the day, I think that is more important. Brown is not a stressful place. We don't have a GPA, for instance. You can take all your classes pass fail if you want and not get a single grade all throughout college. There isn't this perpetual culture of everyone is working, everyone is trying to outdo the other person, or a chill school. And I think that being chill really gave me the opportunity to explore other things that I was interested in. I started an a cappella group, even though I didn't really sing much in high school. I learned how to cook, and I just I feel like being at a school that was very, very hardcore academics focused may not have been the best fit for me, because at the end, I don't think that was really the number one thing that I was looking for out of college. People put a lot of pressure on themselves when they apply to college, because there is this perception that we've created that some are better than others, right? And then it becomes all about prestige, and it's just so untrue once you finish it and you're out. But it's so difficult to internalize that when you're in the middle of it. It's much easier for me to say now that I'm done. And it's hard when your parents are oh, this college is so good, or oh, this person's daughter goes to this school.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of it right now, so I can understand.
Yeah, it sucks, right? And the thing that you really just have to try and do is keep your head straight and realize that no matter where you go, it's not the school that matters, but it's like the work that you put in. And if you put in that work wherever you go, you will be fine.
Nice.
All right. I
Okay.
think that's all we have. So
Cool.
thanks
Have a
again,
good
and you too. Or
Thanks.
have a good day.
Bye.